Hello, I'm Michael Pearson. This is The Human Condition. Our topic today is understanding the connections between insulin and obesity. I have so many people ask about this, and what we need to do today is talk about what are those connections and how can you identify them and break them. This is something that is fairly easy to do if you know the secrets, and most people don't know the secrets because you're taught the wrong thing. In school, in public school, you're taught the wrong thing. Yes. And when you go to your doctor, you're taught the wrong thing. And when you go to your dietitian, you're taught the wrong thing. I'm sorry. I didn't cause this, but it's the truth. There are special interests that have caused this to be the case, and they make money doing it, and that's the fact. So let's figure it out and let's fix it. It's very easy to fix. For those of you that it isn't easy, I'm going to try to unpack that today so that you don't feel shamed. It's very important to not feel shamed and to feel like you can do this because you can, and you just need a good community that can help you overcome this. There may always be, one in 1,000 or one in 10,000 people or one in 100,000 people that can't get better because of some very, very rare and disease with need for heroic intervention. But those are extremely rare. I don't want you to think that, most people are the exception, because if you start believing that most people are the exception, you'll never get better, and you'll be trapped in a body that you don't want to be trapped in when your body has the power to change. I can't tell you how important it is to realize that how flexible and how malleable and how plastic and an ability to change, which is what plastic means. It's moldable and malleable. The human body is. You may not know it and you may have never seen it, but I have seen it, and I can assure you that most people can do that. Most people are not so bad, so far down the road of chronic disease that they can't help this problem. So let's dive into unpacking what happens with obesity. Let's say that you're already significantly obese, you're significantly overweight by the definitions, which is a certain percentage above an expected weight to height ratio. And I understand that some people don't fit those weight to height ratios because of their genetics and their heritage and their skeletal structure. And I get that. But we're talking about many, many times what should be healthy for you. And if you've been trying to get rid of that, there may be some reasons behind it. The first reason that we need to look at behind obesity that doesn't respond is processed foods. You'll find that with processed foods, almost everyone agrees, regardless of whether you're more protein, more fat, more carb based, whether you're vegetarian or carnivore, whether you're some keto combination in between, whatever you are, almost everybody agrees that processed food is a driver of obesity. So I think probably Robert Lustig, who is my most favorite doctor on this, because he straddles the biggest, largest number of camps by saying, look, it's not about keto, it's not about carnivore, it's not about vegan, it's about pure raw, not just raw, but pure raw and cooked foods that are farm to table, that are minimally processed. And I believe that. And so that's the first step. We've got to get rid of processed foods. If you need to take a lunch to school instead of eating school lunch, if you need to really take care of your own cooking, doing more for shopping, that may be really important for you. If you've got a lifestyle, maybe you're a coder, maybe you're a night shift worker, maybe you don't cook, you're going to have to find a solution to get around processed food, because that is the recipe for obesity. The next thing to talk about is the grains, beans, nuts, and seeds problem, which is to say that largely, if you want to fatten a mammal, if you want to fatten a cow or a pig or a human, you give them grains, beans, nuts, and seeds. And that's how you put weight on them to marble their muscles so that you can, harvest them and get good meat out of them. So, if your desire is to not have that kind of problem, it would be ideal to look at history and look at all the different cultures that minimize their carbohydrates and reduce them to fruits and maybe some root vegetables, maybe some leafy vegetables, maybe some, seasonal foods that were appropriate for where they lived in the, what latitude and longitude on the earth they lived and what light they got. And that brings us to the next topic, which is light as well. If you're getting the right light for both your genes and where you live, which both have to be balanced, and you're reducing the artificial blue light, getting enough proper blue light from the sun, proper red light from the sun, proper UV light from the sun, you can cheat more. And yes, I said that. You can cheat more. I'm not a purist when it comes to diet and food. I don't make people say you must comply with this particular diet. You must always eat this and that. You must always comply, because I don't think that's the case. I will say that if you're really, really, really sick and you've got like a terrible heart condition that's really acute, or you've got a long-standing brain condition, or you've got a very fragile seizure disorder, or you've got an autoimmune disease, you probably will have to be rather strict with your diet. But in general, the more you can get light that is appropriate for your genetic heritage and where you live now, which may not match, right? There are some people that Dr. Jack Cruz tells you got to move. You're so sick and your genes aren't right. You got to move. You got to move more closer to the equator. And a number of people have to do that, and the effects on their bodies are much better. So if you're getting appropriate sunlight and you're not getting too much blue light, you can cheat more with food. Yes, you can cheat more with food. Now, if you can't do that, then it may be very important for you to be super strict with keto and carnivore types of diets, getting rid of, every lectin in the world, getting rid of every grain, bean, nut, and seed, getting rid of oxalates, which are in, of course, the leafy green vegetables, which we consider healthy. And, when I went to chef school, we were all taught that all these green, wonderful leafy foods were full of nutrients, and they are, but they're also full of oxalates and they're full of phytates that bind to nutrients and carry them out of your body in your urine and stool. So you really don't get the benefit of those foods. So sometimes it's best to not eat, those green leafy vegetables that you were taught are great for you. And I don't want to sound like, the President Bush when he said, I don't want to eat my broccoli and act like nobody should ever eat healthy foods, but you got to redefine what's healthy for you. Broccoli might be unhealthy for you. You might be somebody who can't handle the brassica family, which is, the broccoli, the cauliflower, the Brussels sprouts, these different foods that are in that family of what we used to think of as high in sulforaphanes and therefore good anti-cancer foods. Well, they may be anti-cancer foods, but the problem is if you've got an oxalate sensitivity or if you've got a sulforaphane sensitivity or some other kind of problem where you can't handle the various anti-nutrients that are in the brassica family, those may be the worst foods for you. I can't tell you how many people tell me, gosh, Dr. Pierce, I'm nearly carnivore. I just eat the brassica family because they're supposed to be so good for me. I also eat, Swiss chard and kale and all these superfoods. And they end up telling me that they're full of oxalates. And we do a urine test, and sure enough, they're full of oxalic acid and oxalates. And that's why they've got kidney stones, and that's why they've got muscle pain. That's why they're achy all the time. That's why they've got, pains in their eyeballs and pains in their feet. They've got pseudo gout, which means it looks like gout, but it's not gout. And the really weird thing is the more carbs a person eats, the more they get a gout positive uric acid test, even though it really isn't gout, it's really oxalic acid. It's really pseudo gout. And so they end up with these problems of uric acid and oxalic acid being elevated because of their insulin resistance and their blood sugar, not because they eat rich foods like red meat, cheese, wine, chocolate, which is what we considered in the past high oxalate foods and foods that cause gout, that cause uric acid and oxalic acid problems. So we're discovering that, true carnivores that are really healthy don't have kidney stones, they don't have gout, and they don't develop cancers at the rate that the rest of us do. So there must be something there, and we need to study that. If you're also having problems with obesity and overweight and you can't get weight off and keep it off, it may be that you have insulin resistance. And so we may have to measure fasting insulin, which is extremely important. Most people measure fasting glucose, they don't measure fasting insulin. So consider that. That can be measured with just a fasting blood test in the morning. You just don't eat anything for breakfast. You go to bed, you just drink water. If you get up at night, in the morning, you don't drink any coffee, any tea, you don't eat anything and drink anything except water. And you go to the lab and get your blood drawn. And then after that, you can have all the breakfast you want. And that will give you a measurement of fasting insulin, not fasting glucose, not fasting blood sugar, because that changes much later. We also want to talk about satiety. The satiety centers in our brain are triggered by fat consumption. So if you want to trigger your satiety centers to say, I'm full, you've got to eat fat with every meal. If you eat a carbohydrate meal, you're not going to reach that satiety, and you can eat a giant bag of, say, popcorn or a giant bag of chips or a giant bag of, anything that's carbohydrate snacks, cookies, crackers. You'll just never stop. You'll never reach the bottom of the bag. And that's because you don't have this fat signal of eating saturated fats in your diet. So you've got to include saturated fat. Some people even just drink olive oil. They drink olive oil to give themselves a feeling of fullness and satiety, and that helps them lose weight. I don't object to that. Now, certainly there's other oils that may be better than olive oil, but olive oil is very healthy. It can be very useful for people. It isn't a fully saturated fat, and I advocate for more saturated fats. But look, Olive oil is not going to kill you. If you're overweight, you're doing worse than olive oil, and olive oil is going to be okay. And then one of our last topics for this particular round is what happens when we cannot tolerate protein and fatty foods. This is a question that I get asked specifically a lot by people that are very, very earnest. They've tried everything, they've lost weight, and then they've gained it back again. And what they say is, Mike, when I eat a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet, when I reduce my carbohydrates, I get super hungry. I can't handle it. And when I eat protein and fat, I get gassy and bloated. My stomach hurts. I get constipation and diarrhea, and I can't get better. Well, there's three real reasons why that happens. One is you're under a tremendous amount of stress. If you're under a tremendous amount of stress and you've got adrenal stress problems, you are going to crave carbohydrates and you're not going to burn efficiently your fats because of your stress level. So you've got to address your lifestyle. That means whatever family issues, whatever work issues, whatever environmental issues are in your way. If you've got problems with your taxes, your houses, your relationship, your divorce, your business, you've got to do something about that chronic adrenal stress so that you don't have that constant sugar craving, because sugar craving comes from adrenal stress and adrenal burdens. You can do urine and saliva tests for that if you need to, but you can also just start to lower your stress level and blood pressure and pulse and heart rate variability and galvanic skin resistance. You can do those things to get rid of those stresses and reduce those stress measurements. You can even put a thermometer on your forehead and do biofeedback. Simple biofeedback will show you. You can buy these devices for $100. You can put a temperature gauge on your forehead. You can put a temperature gauge on your fingers. You can put an electrical skin resistance, galvanic skin resistance on your fingers. These are $100 or $200. They hook up to your phone. Some of them are freestanding without a phone. Some of them hook up to your computers, and they're super easy to use. And you can use it to lower your stress level. You can also know that the other of the three things, one is the stress. The other one is that you have insufficient bile. If you're eating high protein and high fat foods that are healthy and good for you, and they're from good, healthy animals, and you can't digest them, chances are that the years of lectins you've been eating from plant foods have inhibited your bile production. Those lectins bind to your intestine, they bind to your pancreas, they bind to your liver, and they literally inhibit your bile secretion so that you feel sour stomach. And like a deer that's eating, a plant in the woods, the plant makes these lectins, the animal eats the lectins, the animal feels sick, and the animal walks away and migrates to another set of fresh plants that have not been eaten down so much. And then the cycle starts over. The animal eats the plant tolerates it for a while, the plant makes more and more lectins, the animal eats the lectins, the animal migrates away, and the cycle starts again. So you as a human, and me, can suffer from this problem where if we eat lectins from plants, especially, we're going to end up getting a real inhibition of bile production and lots of other problems. There are books written and huge chapters written and lots of papers written about what lectins do to us. And I don't have time to go into those today, but there's a lot of literature in the lectin literature, Lectin. Look it up and start to understand what goes on. Go on PubMed or Medline, which is a free government service of all the peer-reviewed literature, and start looking up lectins and your disease, whatever's wrong with you, and start looking up your organ, your system, your symptoms, your disease, and plus the word lectin, and see if you can find a link to that or the word anti-nutrient. And so the last of the three reasons why a person in earnest tells me that they can't tolerate the protein and fats is that they're going through a purge. When you switch from a high carb diet to a low carb protein and fat diet, it's well known that it can take 12 weeks for an Olympic athlete to become fat adapted, which means it takes time for a body to switch from carbohydrate dominant to fat dominant. And during that process, you're purging out lectins, you're pooping out, undigested plant proteins. And I know we've been taught that it's animal proteins that clog us up, but it really isn't. Carnivore humans don't have problems with their bowels after about 3 months, but the first 12 weeks can be really difficult, and you're pooping out all those different lectins. And so one of the things you can do is you can take enemas, you can take colonics, you can take foods that clear out your body binders that bind to lectin, things like glucosamine sulfate. You can take glucosamine sulfate with every meal and even between meals and begin to purge. You might become, B1 or other B vitamin deficient. So sometimes you might have to take organ meat pills or B vitamins to replace that. I'm not real I know there's a lot of fake vitamins out there, and I've been on camera talking about how we can take individual vitamins, and I realize there's a problem. But for those people that are super sick, a great transition is to take individual vitamins, even though eventually you really need to get away from taking supplements and relying on food. But if you're really sick, vitamins are a heck of a lot better than the drugs that they're pushing on you. So I would rather see you take vitamins that are industrial vitamins than drugs, and use that as a transition to get off of the vitamins and off of the drugs and really get well. Look for communities, look for people like us, look for events, look for live events, look for group events, look for places like Low Carb Down Under, look for the mitochondriacs, look for Jack Cruz's groups, look for CrossFit people do a really good job. There are a number of CrossFit lectures online. And of course, go to my website, humanconditionlab.com, and look at all the different resources that I have on there. It's quite a rich website for you, and it's all free. You can also talk to me if you need to. I'm hard to get to sometimes, but you may be able to make an appointment with chat with me if you need to. I also do groups. Sometimes we can do a group type of thing, and just put that in your Calendly if you want to do a group. So thank you very much. That is the connections between insulin and obesity.